It was a case of lament for the pasukan bawah 23 tahun bola sepak di Malaysia as the Young Tigers fell 0-1 to host Thailand in the Southeast Asia Games under 22 men's football tournament at Raja Mangala Stadium earlier tonight. For Nafuzi Zain's Young Tigers, it was a case of, you can say, sheer misfortune, being unlucky, but at the same time, mistakes of their own doing. Those few mistakes that could have allowed them to keep 11 men on the pitch for the full 90 minutes instead of just only 17 minutes. And what could have happened if, for all the gallantry, all that bravery that those 10 young tigers showed after the second yellow card to their defender, their fullback, Aiman Yusof, following a second yellow card on the 17th minute, following yet another bookable offense having been booked in the early stages of this game. And as what some people would say, it is really tidak mantang. By having a man down so early, Aiman Yusof clearly let his team down when the team really needed him to be there, especially when they knew they were coming up against the hosts who were desperate to regain the gold medal that they last won. And especially this time when the games is held on home soil, they were desperate to win it from the last time they won it way back in 2017 before losing in the last two SEA Games men's football final, first to Vietnam, then to Indonesia, and they wanted to make sure that they will reach a third successive final and perhaps to end that barren run of not winning the goal compared to the seniors who used to rule the Southeast Asia Games with so much swagger, so much confidence, and yet this generation of young players appeared to be somewhat lacking. And for Malaysia, for Nafuzi Zain's Young Tigers, it was a case of being very fortunate to be even in the semi-finals at all after edging out Indonesia in the battle for the best runners-up place by just sub 2 goal. And this was because they built up that 4-1 win over Laos in the opening group stage game. And with all that, and in spite of all that, familiar patterns re-emerge again in this Southeast Asian Games. First was that 0-2 defeat to Vietnam that condemned them to a second place finish, scrapping by on a much better goal difference compared to the defending champions Indonesia. And if we go a little further down, we will also realize that throughout 2025, the major wins that Malaysia has secured in their competitive outings, whether it's in the ongoing Southeast Asian Games or in the ASEAN Under 23 Championships or in the AFC Under 23 Asian Cup qualifiers, the majority of their goals were scored in those big wins against minor nations. In this tournament, it was Laos. In the Under 23 qualifiers, it was Mongolia. And previously in the ASEAN Championships, it was Malaysia in the 7-1 win. And unfortunately this time, with Fergus Tierney still unavailable until right now, what we know as the third place playoff for the bronze medal for Gangsa, that will be the only game that the Sabah striker will be able to feature in these games after he was used extensively in his club's 0-5 defeat to Johor Darul Takzim in the Piala FA Malaysia final the previous day at the Stadium Nasional Bukit Jalil. Now, going back to the game itself, imagine the uphill task Nafuzi Zain and his coaching staff had to face after they were let down by the rather immature defensive maneuvers of their fullback Aiman Yusof or Nabil Yusof, as from what we saw in the TV commentary. So, for that player, it was a case of being desperate to try to keep in pace with the under 18, with the Thai number 18. But the problem is, having been booked once, normally a player would understand that he's already walking on thin ice, that he should not do something rather bolder to make it a debatable second yellow, unless it was out of a sacrifice for the team, or as sometimes the cliche would say, taking it one for the team. And we are up against one of the strictest referees in Asia who is involved in this game, from Uzbekistan some more. He's not going to give second chances. This is not the case of what I say about getting 2 yellow cards in the grand final in yesterday's video on the Malaysia Piala FA Malaysia final. But in this case, on such a grand game where in heightened expectations, you will expect cooler heads to prevail. Yes, these are young men who still have some impulses in them, but to be overcome by the occasion by pulling the Thai number 18's jersey in an attempt to stop him, knowing that he was already on a yellow card early in the game, was just sheer immaturity and sheer defensive stupidity. I know the alternative would be let that number 18 run, don't pull the shirt, get overrun, and maybe there might have been another goal. But even with 2 goals down, had that happened, at least Malaysia would still have 11 players who could still do something, and at least numerically still be on equal terms with the host. But it did not happen. Instead, the remaining 10 men had to play out a gallant, you can say, their best performance of the games, where they gave everything they could except one critical thing: score. Really. Tiada penamat. And that was the issue that unfortunately the Young Tigers has faced all year long under Nafuzi. Without Fergus Tierney, who is not the most prolific of scorers, but he certainly knows where to find the back of the net when presented with a chance, and knows where the goal is. It's down to the boots of the others to show that they are equally capable of sharing the workload. And it's not against just the likes of Brunei, Laos, or Mongolia. It's the more decent teams, the tougher competitions, or teams that are stronger than Malaysia, that they should be able to find the back of the net as well, which to some extent Malaysia tried and did manage to exploit the weaknesses in Thailand's defense, especially the space that Thailand generously gave them, particularly in the second half. But there was one thing Malaysia could not do: score. And games are eventually judged by the goals scored, not by how well you play, not by how well a team performs, not by how fantastic you are in exploiting the opponent's mistakes. Because if no, if the team cannot exploit the mistake and converts those mistakes into goals, it does not matter based on the final score itself, because the score only looks at the total number of goals and the scoreline does not lie. So it's a case of really the other penamat, like the shooting boots. What happened after the Laos game? Why did they leave their shooting boots somewhere against Vietnam? And they tried. They did test the Thai goalkeeper. They were really unfortunate not to find not even a single shot at the back of the net. They came quite close a number of times. They forced the Thai goalkeeper into saves on more than a few occasions, but still not enough. And with all due respect to Thailand as the host, the Thais are not that unbeatable. Certainly not as unbeatable as that of the Charantit Songkrasin generation, who did dominate the games previously for 3 successive campaigns between 2013 and 2017, or even when it was between the full national team and the under 23s, 7 successive gold medals between 1990, sorry, 8 between 1993 all the way down to 2007 in Nakhon Ratchasima, the last time Thailand hosted the Southeast Asian Games. 8 successive gold medals, and this was through different generations of excellent Thai players who were able to dominate with swagger, with composure, with technical excellence, with a ruthless eye for goal, with the ability to find spaces where opponents could not see, to be a few steps ahead of their opponents, big, small, strong, or weak in Southeast Asia. This was how Thailand was. But even in this semi final, you could sense that, especially in the second half, Thailand were not that impenetrable. They got lobang. They had defensive lobang, which Malaysia were quick to spot and play a quick direct game to allow, especially on the left side, to exploit, to power with speed, and to keep testing the goalkeeper at the near post. And the thing is, even though they had a number of attempts at goal, the problem is I think I go back to a previous point: lack of finishing, lack of the final touch, and ultimately no finish, no goal, no point, and no final for Young Tigers. That was how it was. So unfortunately, despite the best efforts of Nafusi Zain and the players, their failure to score once against decent opponents has proven to be a big downfall. And I think in the space of things, looking at how they just scraped by to reach the semi-finals, Malaysia were already very fortunate to even be in medal contention for these SEA Games, having been underwhelming in the ASEAN Under-23 Championships where they exited the group stage, and also in the AFC Under-23 Asian Cup qualifiers, where they also failed to deliver apart from the one win against Mongolia. So it was a case of not really being up to it, especially when they lost to Lebanon in the group stage as well. So ultimately, in that repeat encounter where they also faced their opponents a few months ago, in the same group in the AFC Under 23 qualifiers. It was a case of, in this time, Sakon being back to his little best. In fact, the goal scorer of the game, Sakon Bupa, showed Malaysia what it means to finish. He's currently the tournament's leading goal scorer with 6 goals in 3 games. And the Hougang United striker, who is actually on loan from Chonburi, has shown why this type of finishing is so essential in a tournament setting. If you do not know where the back of the net is, you are not going to win games. And in the battle for their first medal, berjuang untuk tingkat pertama sejak tahun 2011, where they last won the SEA Games men's football gold medal. This is going to be a very uphill task for the Fuzi Giants men, because in their standing in the way for their first medal since in 14 years is the Philippines. On paper, those who didn't know better, the Philippines are in a way the surprise package for this SEA Games football men's football tournament. But already in the ASEAN Under 23 Championships, the young Ascals has sounded the warning by performing with excellence, reaching the last 4 of that tournament as well, adopting a new strategy of getting heritage young players who have Filipino blood, who are already based overseas, to play for them. And that strategy has now paid off handsomely at the under 22 level. And in this context, where this is concerned, Nafusi Giants men has a lot of work to do. And yes, they did reach the semi-finals, but will that be enough? Will the return of Fergus Tierney be enough to help Nafusi Giants save his job? Because, to be honest, based on the results, not just for this semi-final, but throughout the whole year where he was involved in those qualifying competitions, he was not convincing. And in Bangkok so far, he has still not convinced. Yes, there was the resounding 4-1 win. They know how to beat the very weak opponents, but it's against those opponents, at least at their level, or strong opponents, that Nafusi is still found wanting. It has been a steep learning curve for the former Terengganu coach, as I admit, but the thing is, if he's not able to set up and respond, in fact, it took Nafusi a while to finally adjust to that 4-4-1 set adjustment at the start of the second half before he got around with a solution. It showed that steep learning curve is still yet inadequate for him, and whether time will tell whether he should be given another chance. But I've said before, another chance, that's a lot harder, because when the players have given the best they could, but this time around this time against Thailand is not totally the coach for either, because they did play to the instructions. They did fight hard even with 10 men, which really is admirable in spirit, and with plenty of courage in their fight to battle for the equalizer until the very last kick. That character was finally shown in this game. But that battle for the first medal in 14 years is far from over. Philippines will be as hard as Thailand. given how the young Ascals have been performing, given the good fight that the young Ascals had put up against Vietnam in the other semi-final, where they eventually succumbed by 2 late goals to progress to fail at that stage and progress into the bronze medal playoff. So, from the way that Malaysia has been setting up, will they hope for the return of Fergus Tierney before they can finally find the goals again when that bronze medal is at stake? Or is it possibly now that by the time the Philippines game is decided, that this bronze medal playoff could well be Nafuzi Zain's swan song as Malaysia under 23 head coach?